The Watcher in the Woods. Jenny always loved the solitude of her family's cabin deep in the woods. It was her sanctuary, a place to escape from the stresses of everyday life. This weekend, she decided to go alone for the first time. She packed her bags and drove out on a Friday evening, looking forward to a weekend of peace and quiet. As night fell, Jenny settled into the cozy living room with a book. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. She thought nothing of it, just the usual sounds of the forest at night. But then she heard something else, a faint rustling sound, like footsteps crunching on leaves. She dismissed it as an animal and continued reading. An hour later, the sound came again, louder this time. She peered out the window but saw nothing in the darkness. Feeling uneasy, she decided to lock all the doors and windows. She tried to reassure herself that it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. The next morning, Jenny went for a walk in the woods. She followed a familiar path, breathing in the crisp, fresh air. As she rounded a bend, she stopped dead in her tracks. There on the path were fresh footprints. They were large, too large to be hers, and they led straight to the cabin. A chill ran down her spine. Someone had been watching her. She hurried back to the cabin and locked herself inside. She checked every room, every closet, but found nothing out of the ordinary. She tried to shake off the fear, telling herself it was probably a hiker who wandered too close. But she couldn't ignore the feeling of being watched. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard it again. The crunching footsteps, now circling the cabin. Her heart pounded in her chest. She grabbed her phone to call for help, but realized there was no signal this deep in the woods. The footsteps stopped abruptly. Then came a slow, deliberate knock on the door. Jenny froze, too terrified to move. The knock came again, louder this time. She mustered all her courage and crept to the window, peeking through the curtains. Standing just outside the door was a figure, cloaked in darkness. She couldn't make out any features, just the silhouette of a tall, imposing figure. The knocking turned into pounding, the door shaking on its hinges. Jenny backed away, looking for something to defend herself with. She grabbed a heavy fireplace poker and braced herself. The pounding stopped. Silence filled the cabin, more unnerving than the noise. Suddenly the door burst open, and the figure stepped inside. Jenny screamed and swung the poker with all her might. The figure staggered back but didn't fall. It moved closer, reaching out with long, bony fingers. In a moment of sheer panic, Jenny ran for the back door, flinging it open and sprinting into the woods. She didn't stop until she reached her car, fumbling with the keys and finally starting the engine. She sped down the dirt road, not daring to look back. When she reached the nearest town, she went straight to the police. They returned to the cabin with her, but there was no sign of the intruder. The door was intact, and there were no footprints. It was as if the figure had never existed. Jenny never went back to the cabin alone again. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, watching, waiting for her to return. And every now and then, in the dead of night, she could still hear the faint sound of footsteps crunching on leaves, getting closer and closer.